Welcome back. And you know, this is a favorite topic of mine, the power of women. I had the opportunity 2 weeks ago to film this. Unfortunately, Elizabeth Lesser is on sequestration this month because she's writing a brand new book. But she has such deep things to say. And I really look forward to sharing this video with you right now. Thank you for listening. Welcome, Elizabeth Lesser. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to let everyone know that you are the co-founder of Omega Institute, and this is America's largest adult education center with workshops in spiritual activities and empowerment and all sorts of wonderful things that we all can use. You're also the author of several best-selling books and TED Talks, over 2 million views. You're co-founder of Omega's Women Leadership Center, and that grew out of your popular Women in Power that I was privileged to be at this year. So I really appreciate that. So you are a person that's been deep into empowerment and women's issues for a very, very long time. So we're inviting you to something here, and it's the Drawdown Festival Tools for Regeneration. What is your exposure, Elizabeth, to Drawdown?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. First of all, hello, everybody. I'm really glad to be here, and thank you for having me. Yeah, sometimes people wonder about a conference and retreat center like Omega Institute, where we focus a lot on physical health, holistic health, psychological healing, spiritual retreats. Why would you ever want me here at a Drawdown conference? But we have been doing Drawdown work at Omega for many years. We've had Paul Hawkins and Catherine and a whole bunch of speakers at our Drawdown events because we know that the empowerment and liberation of any one person cannot happen without the liberation of all people and the non-humans and the earth itself. So work on the self. If you just put on blinders and don't think about all the other selves in the world, it's just not going to work, besides being kind of selfish and narcissistic. But we have to work on our health, others' health, and the health of the ecosystem. So we've put a lot of work at Omega into, we have something called the Eco Machine. About 30,000 people come through our campus every year, pre-COVID, hopefully post-COVID too. And all of our wastewater, all of our waste is processed without chemicals through what's called John Todd's Eco Machine, which uses plants to metabolize all the waste and turn it into clean water. And we've had many environmental conferences. All the great environmental leaders have come and spoken, including Drawdown work. So I feel very connected to what you're doing.
Thank you. I want to start also by asking you about a TED Talk that you gave. And I never knew you had been a midwife and had practiced that in your 20s. And in your talk, you speak about sacred awe. How does sacred awe apply to our climate situation?
No one has ever asked me that. That's a beautiful question. Well, sacred awe is a line that Albert Einstein used. And he said, the holiest expression you can have, the deepest spiritual practice you can have, is living in a state of sacred awe about the universe, about nature, about just the miraculous idea that we even exist, that we're consciousness in these bodies. It's like, I think if we were in touch with it enough, we would just go around with our mouths wide open, like, oh my God, you're here too? Isn't this amazing? But we're also caught up in our difficulties and our stress. We often forget what an amazing miracle it is that we even exist and that the earth is such a welcoming and perfectly balanced place for humans to experience sacred awe. And when I was a midwife, which was my first job in life, I delivered babies and taught uh, labor classes to many, many women and men. That was such an experience of sacred awe for me. And it really solidified my path as a feminist, because so much of our experience as women is hating our bodies, thinking our bodies aren't enough, aren't beautiful enough, thin enough, buff enough, whatever it is we think a perfect human body should be. And when I experienced women giving birth, I came into an entirely different experience of the female body, which is one of strength and vitality and incredible fierceness. And I feel that the way we treat our bodies is very similar to the way we treat the body of the earth, which is a sense of lack of sacred awe and selfishness and just trying for perfection and getting what we want, as opposed to appreciating what we have. And being a midwife definitely helped me appreciate the body I have and want to take care of it. Like, if you don't love your body, you don't really want to take care of it. And if you don't love the earth, you don't want to take care of it. That's why we've put a lot of work at Omega into classes for children and school visits for children to experience nature, because who would want to take care of the earth if you didn't love it and you didn't have a sense of sacred awe toward it?
That is beautiful, Elizabeth. Thank you. In that same TED Talk, during the difficult time of the passing of your sister, you noted one of your learnings was to stay open, to stay curious, and ask the pain what it's come to deliver.
Yeah.
How does that relate to your experience now with climate?
Yes. Well, for any of you who have had babies out there, or any of you who've had difficult times, so that includes all of us. But what I learned so much during labor, helping women during labor and having my own children, the uterus and the cervix, the cervix is at the base of the uterus. And during all the 9 months of labor, it's tight as a fist, this little feisty muscle here, keeping all infection out for the baby who's developing in the uterus. And then all of a sudden, it has to open to this big. Now, this is ouch. This is really painful when something this small has to stretch to this big to let a baby's head out. That's what a contraction is. And if when the contraction comes and it's trying to open, and the woman's response is, no, go away, pain, go away. You're fighting the pain. You're fighting the reason of the pain. And so my work as a midwife often was really only to help a woman welcome the pain, which is not easy, because half the time the women wanted to punch me when I said welcome the pain, because it's really painful. And when you're going through a really hard time as a person, sometimes the worst thing a friend can do is say, well, everything comes for a reason, don't say that, let me say. But everything does come for a reason. And so the great climate catastrophes we're experiencing now, they are messages saying, this cannot go on this way. I'm not telling all of you anything you don't know. Anyone who works in the environmental world knows that the storms, even COVID, everything that's happening is just a message from the earth saying, I am in pain. And if you all shut down to pain and pretend this isn't happening, it's just going to get worse. It's a perfect metaphor labor and what we're going through as an Earth community now. If we can't face the pain, we're just going to make it worse. So staying open, staying hopeful, staying on course, sticking with it is the way to go forward.
That's beautiful, really beautiful. At the Women in Power conference, you gave a spectacular talk. I love that you identify yourself as a feminist. And how do you bring those thoughts of being a feminist into work on climate? And you also spoke about brain, which I found fascinating.
Well, I am a feminist. I have been my whole life. You know, I was in college in the 1970s at Barnard College, a women's college in New York City. It was a hotbed of feminism at the time. My mother was a very active feminist. For her generation, that was unusual. And I've come from a family of 4 girls. So I have always been someone who knows that the stories told about women throughout history are false stories told by usually men with a, excuse me one sec, the purpose to keep women down and women's ideas about life and our values second rate, you know, all the way back to the Bible. Women were born second, but first to sin. So this sort of sticks to us and to the culture. Women, we stopped trusting ourselves, we stopped trusting our values. And you talked about the brain research that I included in my speech at the Women in Power conference. And I love this research, and I'm super shocked that it's not a huge part of our knowledge, our shared knowledge and our lexicon. And that's that in the 1940s, someone named Walter Cannon, he was the head of psychology at Harvard in the 1940s. And he was very interested in stress. What do human beings do under stressful situations? And so he brought people into his lab and he hooked them up to machines to measure their brains under simulated stressful experiences. And then he collected his data after hundreds and hundreds of people's brains had been monitored. And he came up with the word fight or flight. Under stress, human beings either fight, they aggress, conflictual, difficult things happen, aggression, or they flee, they disconnect, or they run away. So that's what we've come to understand. That's the science stories we all just decided that's true. Under stress, we fight or flight. So in the early 2000s, a woman named Shelley Taylor, a PhD clinical psychologist at UCLA, looked at that research again, and she noticed something interesting. The only people that were brought into that original work were men. So that wasn't that unusual. Most medical research, until very recently, was only done on men. They would not bring female people into studies because they thought our hormones got in the way of the science. Hello. Anyway, I won't go there. But Dr. Taylor and her colleagues at UCLA brought women into the lab and recreated the original studies done at Harvard with women and measured their hormonal and blood responses to stress. And she noticed and released her data in an incredible book called The Tending Instinct, that women, yes, sometimes they have a flight or fight response to conflict and stress, but usually they did something that she called tend or befriend. Under stressful situations, women either tend to the most vulnerable in the group, or they create circles of befriending to deal with their own stress. So, you come home from work, you're really stressed out. Instead of fleeing to the television and disconnecting, women often will call their friends or have friends over or talk with their family and create these circles of befriending to deal with stress. And she noticed that the primary gender difference, I'm reading this, in adult human behavioral responses to stress is befriending. That women reach out as opposed to disconnecting. They communicate and they want to create group response to stress. So without getting too much men bad, women good, this is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that throughout history, women's responses to stress have been denigrated. It's seen as weak to deal with stress by caretaking the vulnerable. It's seen as honorable and noble to go to war, but caretaking is seen as kind of soft skills. And so what do women have to do now with the environmental crisis? Everything. What we need now is an ethos of care. We need to validate care. We need to elevate care. We need to have statues of caring people as opposed to statues of violent soldiers. We need to make caretaking of the earth and of each other the instinct that all humans need to develop now.
Wow, that is so powerful. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know what? I've been in touch with Dr. Taylor. She's still in UCLA. And I said to her in an email, we should read, that book should be brought out again with a new introduction. And she was like, I'm just tired of trying to get it across. You take over. The young people take over. Like I tried, and you guys take over now. So we have to take over this idea that caretaking is a noble human response.
Yes. And an extension of that, in a way, is a bit, I used to come as an environmental activist from the perspective of they are the problem, sort of meaning the men are the problem. And that was a bit exacerbated when I understood that women choose about 85% of all consumer goods.
Mm.
And so I'm wondering how you hold those things in light of the revelations you've had.
Yes, it's always a bad idea to think it's their problem, anyone's problem, that country, that religion, that political party, that gender. And that's where my spiritual work comes into play with my environmental work, which is I am they is me. We all have tendencies in us to behave poorly, selfishly, to respond with aggression and unhelpful behavioral modes of being. So I am always working on, be, as Gandhi said, the hackneyed phrase of Gandhi, but no one said it better, being the change I want to see in the world. So yes, I have an instinct of tend and befriend in me, but do I act on it all the time? Am I doing it with my husband and my kids and my grandkids and my colleagues and my friends? So even as I'm a fierce advocate for women and environment and all sorts of social justice issues, I'm also always looking at myself. Can I purchase more environmentally responsibly? Am I doing that? Am I just clicking on Amazon all the time and not thinking about the packaging and do I need it? Is it enough? So yeah, I think both are necessary. It's never just one or the other. It's never just all about me, and it's never about them, those bad people. It's a dance.
Yeah, right. Sometimes I talk to people and they say, well, this is now all in the hands of the youth. They've got to do it all. What do you say to that?
Well, once again, it's all hands on deck. If it's just the youth, we can't abandon them. We made the mess. Our ancestors made the mess. So we got to do it with them. I think a couple of things. Our culture really invalidates older people. And as an older person and a grandmother, I have to watch that in myself, this sense that I'm no longer useful. I'm just an old fart and I'm not, woke enough. And and that's really a shame, because I have a lot of wisdom that I've accrued just by living. And I want to be in partnership with younger people, because not only that, because they'll inherit the earth, but the new generation always brings the tools for the work now. So when I feel out of it and like I'm on the train station and the train left and I'm just left behind, like, what? I ask my young friends to school me, to educate me, to bring me up to speed for what's going to work now. And it's an exchange of my wisdom and patience and the ability to love and the things that older people hone with their fire and newness and passion. I think it's a shared responsibility and a shared joy. We recently had Jane Goodall on a large Zoom gathering, thousands of people from around the world tuning in to listen to her. And her message is always about hope. The debilitating force of despair. I mean, I can be as despairing as the next person, this sense like we are screwed, there's nothing we can do. And to really actively work against despair and to fill our cup with hope and with perspective that humans have always been both just the most brilliant and adorable species and the most evil and worst and selfish. But it's always been like this. This is nothing new. The stakes may be much bigger now because the entire ecosystem is involved. But this is who we are. This is where we are. And it's our time. This is our time. This has been handed to us. What are you going to do with this? And to keep hope alive, that would be my parting message, just like it's Jane Goodall's message, that hope, as Gloria Steinem, the great feminist, always says, hope is a form of planning. Hope is a form of planning. That is the message I would leave.
Thank you, Elizabeth Lesser. Wasn't that really beautiful? Boy, some particular things stood out to me. I love how she talks about sacred awe of the universe and of nature. And in that, at this time, we listen and we hear the pain and we embrace the pain. We welcome the pain. And that's where we move to that place in our brains where we tend and befriend. We tend and befriend and mend. We work on our health, we work on the health of others, and we work on the health of the whole ecosystem. We need to elevate care. We need to validate care and bring our perceptions of the needs and the desires and the glory of care out into the world. She says, this is our time, and hope is a form of planning. And I would posit that planning is a form of hope as well. So now we have the opportunity to listen to Natalie Isaacs of 1 Million Women. You're going to enjoy this so much. Thanks a lot. Welcome, Natalie Isaacs. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Australia and waking up early this morning. I came to know your work through Elizabeth Lesser, whom we just spoke with, Women in Power up at Omega Institute. And I know I'm sorry that our times didn't overlap so we could all be on together. But I know you've started this majorly successful global initiative, 1 million women. You've also been a successful businesswoman and you've had a cosmetics manufacturing company. So welcome. And I'd just like to hear a little bit about how you came to be doing exactly what you're doing now.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely to meet you, Dar. It's really lovely to be part of this. Thank you. Oh my goodness, saying I was a successful businesswoman, it feels like it was honestly, my previous life. It seems such a long time ago, but it's an important story to 1 million women because it is actually where I began. And I've only ever done really two major roles in my life, and one was running my cosmetics company for 24 years, and the second one was running 1 million women. And honestly, they couldn't be more different, because I'm not some long-term green role model. I'm not a climate activist. I'm not a scientist. And in fact, as a cosmetics manufacturer that I was for 24 years, I was actually part of the problem when it comes to overconsumption and overpackaging and, that whole concept of competitiveness I spent most of my time working out ways to get someone's product off the shelf so I could get mine on. So it was a really different life. But the thing is, although I was very passionate about what I was doing and about life, and I was actually disengaged on climate change for a huge part of my life. I thought climate change, was somebody else's problem. I thought that it actually doesn't involve me. It doesn't affect me. And I thought that I'm just one person. So really, what can one person do to make a difference? And, all those things that we say to ourselves for the reasons why we don't roll up our sleeves and get engaged. And I was just disengaged on this issue. And I think another big part of it was that I didn't know enough. For so long, I thought climate change was this overwhelming issue that I really couldn't get my head around. And I think, when you don't know enough about something, it can be anything, that it happens to a lot of us. It's human nature. When you don't know enough about something, you end up doing nothing. And I know for me, I did nothing for so long because I didn't know enough. I didn't want anyone to know I didn't know enough. So it's so much better not to do anything, all those reasons. But for me, I feel I had this epiphany. And although it was probably coming for a while, I felt that somewhere in the middle of 2006, I feel the world got the point on climate change. Those of us that were disengaged, I think the media got the point on climate change. I think Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth came out. I think it was 2006 or 7, 2006. And I think that we were given information about climate change in a way that we could understand it. For me here in Australia, I couldn't listen to the radio or watch the news or open a magazine or a newspaper without there being something about climate change, and it was speaking to me. And so even though I think I had this epiphany, it was probably coming for a little while. There was ferocious bushfires back then, out of season here in Australia, and Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth and other things throughout the year. And so it was coming, but I did something that was really simple in my life that I think was the catalyst that literally changed my life forever. And it was, I got our household electricity consumption down by 20%. And that was it. And when I saw the bill and I saw I'd saved all this money and this pollution, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm actually really powerful. I just did this. By being more vigilant around the house, I just saved a whole chunk of pollution. And I did it without really knowing climate policy, or I just did it. And that was the beginning of the journey. That was the beginning of the road of empowerment, because I realized when you do one thing and it sees this immediate result, it makes you feel really powerful. And so I felt extraordinarily powerful after I got our electricity consumption down. And I thought, well, what else can I do? What else can I do in our house? So I got our food waste down. It was like, I didn't really think much about food waste. I didn't care about portion sizes, how much food was going into the bin, that what, I was buying when I was going shopping. I just cared about having full plates of food, that I didn't even care if the food was left, because at least no one went hungry in the family. And it was, that changing that way of thinking. And so we got our the food going into the bin, we reduced by 80% just by thinking differently.
Yeah.
And then I took a break before I bought something and asked myself, do I really need it? And so I really stopped over consuming. And then all of a sudden I went from being the camp of inaction, disengaged, jumping right across to the camp of action, and changed my life. And so sorry, I'm giving you the very long story. you just tell me when you want me to move on to the next. But the thing is, at that point I went onto the net and I started looking for organizations that spoke to me as a woman who had just done all this stuff in her life and wanted to do more. And I couldn't find, particularly here in Australia, I couldn't find anything that spoke to me, that resonated with me in that moment with what I had done. And so I just decided if I couldn't find it, I had to create it. And that was really the starting point of 1 Million Women, and how I created it, because I thought there must be millions of women out there like I was, disengaged on this issue for whatever reason. And I wanted to bring them along the road, just like I had been brought along. And so with the help of a lot of women and men, we created 1 Million Women from that kind of journey of small things with real results get you engaged in this issue.
So if I go to 1 Million Women and become a member of your site, which of course we'll all do before the end of this session, what will I find? What will I do when I get there?
So 1 Million Women, our whole reason for being, the heart and soul of 1 Million Women, is to, we show you that how you live is key to solving the climate crisis. And we focus on everything we do in our lives. So the energy we use in our homes, the food that we waste, and we talk about how to stop wasting food, how to be energy efficient, how to embrace renewable energy. We talk about overconsumption and how you get from A to B with the least impact on the planet. So we talk about transport. We talk about the economic power of women, and through how where we invest our money in our banks and financial institutions. We also talk about how we vote and voting for climate action, and how we use our voice and our influence, and how we engage with communities. So it's this holistic approach to how we live, and we show you, we're like an educational movement where we show you how to live with the least impact on the planet, and how to find your agency to empower others to do the same. And so we have our website, and we have campaigns that we have running all the time. We have an app that shows you the small actions that you can do and the results. And we campaign on big things. Here in Australia, we campaign on, the health of the Great Barrier Reef, or we have an election coming up. So we'll be being loud and talking about why we need to vote for climate action. So we're a movement of women and girls from across the planet. And we bring you along the road of empowerment by showing you how to live with the least impact on the planet.
Well, you've covered a whole lot of things in that description there, and I want to slow down a little bit and go onto some of those things in detail. And one of the things that you mentioned is you talk about finances, and that you've got something on there that's a pledge that you can take. Can you talk about that pledge and what's involved in that?
Yes, and it is actually something that we as One Women are going to be focusing on so deeply over these next couple of years. So back a few years ago, when I think it was around 2013, and I'd been doing One Women now for say 3 or 4 years. And I honestly thought I was the climate warrior. I had changed my entire life. I had started 1 Million Women. We had hundreds and thousands of women joining and doing things. And to my shock, I didn't realize until, years into 1 Million Women that my bank and my financial institution, so here in Australia, it's our super fund, so my superannuation and my banking were with financial institutions that invest in fossil fuels. And so how counterproductive is that? Here I am doing everything possible to live with the least impact on the planet, and my money, I've allowed my money to be used to invest in the fossil fuel industry. And so that was a big wake-up call for me. And then we did a survey out to our community and realized that actually it was at the bottom of the pile, that where we put our money is something that we don't think about at a great, at that point anyway, at any great level. And to be honest, it is one of the most impactful things that we can do right now, is to shift our money away from those financial institutions investing in fossil fuels and put it into renewable energy projects and projects that are good for the planet. And I think it's just that educational piece, so that we know, what to look for in our bank and our financial institution, and what questions to ask. And basically, if your bank and who you put your money with is not aligning with your values, and particularly now if they're investing in anything in the fossil fuel industry, move your money. It is such a powerful thing to do. And so we've been working on this story for the last few years to elevate it to the top of the pile. And we started a campaign last year about switching your money, so pledging to switch your money. And so, yes, it would be fantastic for anyone listening to go onto our website and to take that pledge that you're going to shift your money, and we send you all the tools to help you do that. But also, over this last 12 months, we have been really looking at the work that we do at 1 Million Women to narrow our work to say, over these next 2 or 3 years, what is the most important thing that we can do as a movement to make the greatest impact? Because we really have, this is the defining decade for climate action. And we need to do everything before 2030, everything we can as citizens of this planet. And so for us, talking about the economic power of women through the money that we invest with our banks, and financial institutions, but also talking about the power of that dollar that we spend or we don't spend. It's going to be a very big theme for us over the next couple of years, and we will be launching a new campaign on that sometime this year. But don't underestimate, anyone listening, the power of that. And it's such a simple one for you to do. is to just take a moment, do your research, see where your bank and your financial institution, what are they investing in, and move your money if they're not investing in the right things.
Yeah. I love the name, Putting My Money Where the Planet Needs It pledge. That's really terrific. And there's a quote in your book, which I love. Imagine if we only used our economic power for the good of the planet. I mean, that says it all. And it's interesting. You're talking about before 2030. I know you've also just written a brand new book that's not even printed yet, but that is about this time frame that we've got, and that we need to be acting right now.
Exactly. And that means, it means that it needs all of us at the same time. So it needs countries and governments, and it needs, cities and communities and households and individuals, and we need to be all acting in whatever capacity we can, wherever we are, all at the same time. And there's never been a more urgent time than right now to do that.
Yeah. There was, we do need everybody, and we do need all things. There was one really optimistic thing that you talked about also in your book, about 10% of the people and the way that change happens. Can you talk a little bit about your understanding of how that works?
Yeah, well, it's just that, if enough of us, and you think it needs everyone to make the change, but in fact, it only needs a small number of people to start that change, to make that movement happen, and then others will follow. And I think that's a really powerful thing to know, that that to make systems change, or to make change happen, if enough of us are doing it all at once, it will influence others to get on board. But I think that it's something that, because I've just put my manuscript in for my second book, and so it's all up there in my head at the moment. And it's that we've got this opportunity right now to transform how we live, and it's a small window, but we need to cut carbon pollution. That is number one. That has to happen drastically. But in the process, we can create a new world. And I think that that's such an exciting opportunity for humanity. We can be kinder. We can be, we can love the earth more than we love stuff, and which is such a big problem when it comes to wealthy countries like Australia and the US. If everybody lived like they do in the US or in Australia, we would need 4 or 5 planets, not just the one that we have. And so in wealthy countries, overconsumption is such a big issue, and it's such a big contributor to climate change. And so it's rethinking the way that we live, understanding the earth and the place that we live, that we live on, and having this deep relationship with earth that helps us, redefine contentment and happiness, that it isn't about more and more stuff. And I think that there is this opportunity right now to have this reset, and that's what this second book's about, is what we need to do in this decade and how we can truly transform how we live in order to fight the climate crisis.
I love the quote that you've got, that relationships beat stuff. Relationships beat stuff. And that only climate action gives us climate hope. But it sounds like with this group of women that you've got, and I think you're really are over 1 million women now, but it feels like that's giving us, with all that action, that we have the optimism that we need to really move forward to that transition that you're talking about.
That's right. And it is really important now that we don't slip into despair. And the only thing that to help counter that is action, because it builds momentum. You've got purpose. If you just sit back and because the news is so bad, sometimes you just feel overwhelmed to take it all in, and which is fine too. But at our core, we need to be determined optimists, and the only way we can be that is through action, acting in our lives, living with the least impact on the planet, influencing others, using our vote, using our dollar. Every time we spend that dollar, it is for the good of the planet, as you say, or don't spend it. But everything we do shapes the world, and I think that having that agency and power, and knowing how powerful we are as individuals, as a collective, gives us that resilience and that optimism that we absolutely have to have. There is no room for anything else. It needs everybody's determination and resilience and optimism, and that is where climate action comes in. And our anthem speaks so beautifully to that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your anthem. We really enjoyed listening to that. That's fabulous. And maybe we'll get to play it again after this. So in closing, do you have a couple of specific things you might suggest for us to do?
Well, yes. Okay, specific things. There's a lot of things, but I guess the easy things that are incredibly powerful in your life is definitely moving your money, is reducing your food waste. If food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, and behind the US and China, and that's a big thing. And reducing our food waste is something every single household can do just by being better at managing food. So I think that's a really big and easy one. And also taking a breath before you buy something and asking yourself, do I really need it? Because overconsumption is choking the planet, and it feeds the fossil fuel industry. And so and I guess when on that note of overconsumption, I think it's also redefining who we are. Like I have been on the other side of this. As a cosmetics manufacturer, I first of all, I had this one beautiful brand called Natalie, and it was all about, the holistic approach to living. It was all about aromatherapy. It had minimal packaging, and it had this beautiful philosophy, Natalie. It had this philosophy that true beauty comes from within, and to be honestly and truly beautiful, it doesn't matter what you put on the surface of your skin. It has to come from in here. And I used to, as a cosmetics manufacturer, I would say that to people buying my product: don't buy my product. It won't do anything for you if you don't marry that up with health and happiness and contentment from within, because that's what comes through you. And so, and I bring a lot of that into 1 Million Women. When I think about that philosophy on a macro scale, it's how we should be looking after the earth. That everything is interconnected, and if one part of the chain is weakened or lets you down, the whole thing could collapse. And so I bring so much of that into the way that I think. However, back then as a cosmetics manufacturer, and I had this beautiful brand, I got seduced by the department stores to develop fast fashion products. And I thought I could justify I thought I could justify it. I thought, yes, I've got my beautiful brand over here. It won't matter if over here I just produce fast fashion plastic crap, because it'll be helping to fund my beautiful brand and to get that message out there. And so how wrong I was, because there I was in the fast fashion industry, and I used to go to department stores at Christmas time, and I used to watch, people, and I was doing it because I wanted to see how much of my product at Christmas time was getting off the shelf and into people's trolleys and through the checkout. And it was just this frenzy of overconsumption. Trolleys filled with plastic, cheap crap that you put under the Christmas tree that would end up in the bin, and that was my product. And I never saw that. I never understood that. I was only interested in you buying my product, because as a small manufacturer, that was what I needed to stay in business. And so I think that, I think that with overconsumption, knowing that I was on that side of the table and now I'm on the other, I think it's really important that everything we buy, we are sending a message to the manufacturer. If you had left my product on the shelf to gather dust, I would have been sent a direct message that you didn't want it. And we have that power as consumers, but we should see ourselves as citizens of this world, not as consumers, and know that when we buy something, we must honor it and value it and respect it, so that it doesn't just in the following week end up in the bin. And so we need to buy less, absolutely buy less, but we need to understand the power of the dollar when we do buy something. And that exchange can be beautiful. It can lift a small business up. It could support someone local. It can support women-led. It can support First Nations-led. That dollar can help somebody else, and it's that ripple effect. And we need to think about all the externalities that are in that product that we buy. And so I think that we are so powerful if we see that exchange when we do spend our money. So yes, they would be my tips.
Okay, two others for you though. One
Yes.
is go to the 1 Million website and sign up and become 1,000,001 women, and go to the 1 Million app and start to get engaged.
Yes.
And I'm actually going to end with one of your quotes,
Thank you.
which is your money, your voice, your vote, your everyday habits, every choice you make can be a choice for climate action and climate hope. Natalie, thank you so much for joining us. This is inspiration for us all to take that next step.
Oh, thank you, Dar. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, wasn't that great to hear, Natalie? And yes, I really do mean take out your iPhones and go there and sign up right now for 1 Million Women. And also the app is phenomenal, and take that pledge. I want to talk a little bit more before we end about our power as women. It's interesting, in Project Drawdown's priority system, the number one solution today that we heard from Mary and climatarians is food waste. Who has that control over food waste? Who in your family determines what happens and how much food waste and where it goes, and do you really eat it all? So that's one thing to think about. Another thing to think about is if you combine women and girls together, they are really the number one solution. And in that realm, they were talking about family planning and educating girls, and that creates, when that's done successfully, a slower population rate. Not telling people not to have babies, but supporting them in ways that they don't have to have planned babies. And one of the ways of doing that is to assist girls in having goals. And that's why it's so important to support organizations like I Try, which helps girls become athletic and create goals in their lives. But another thing to remember when we're talking about population is if you look at the carbon emissions, and Cray showed them earlier in Electrify Everything, I could have one baby in the United States and it would have more carbon footprint than 5 or 6 babies in another country. So we don't have to look someplace else to say, whoa, guys, don't you have your babies? Let's bring it on home. But there are other reasons that I think were even more important than that. We're more powerful than that. And we mentioned with Elizabeth Lesser, 85% of consumer goods are purchased by me. They're purchased by American women. And that is phenomenal. So I don't know if you shared with me the experience of a long time ago. Oh my God, the fossil fuel companies are screwing us over. And it's those guys out there, and it's the business and everything else. Well, the UN did a study, and more than 2/3 of carbon emissions are determined by choices that are made at the household level. That's our choices that are made. A study in Europe showed that 72% of those choices come from decisions made at the household level. And look at what we do. We are the ones that birth these babies and teach them. We choose the foods for them. We choose how they're educated. We are the teachers. And today, we are also the people that are getting the degrees of higher, beyond college degrees, more women that are getting degrees today than men. So look at the increased power that we were bringing into our lives. There is also the way that we educate our kids, which I already mentioned. And Elizabeth Lesser talked about tend, friend, befriend, and mend. Our gift, one of our gifts, is caring for and tending and talking. We bring circles of women together. And the number one solution, according to Catherine Hayhoe, you'll hear more about her tomorrow in Sheila's talk, but talking is a number one solution to climate change. And we have definitely got that covered. So we're looking at how our brains work. Now, one of our opportunities here is to look at this, as Paul Hawken mentioned, as opportunity. Because when we look at it as opportunity, we move from the amygdala part of the brain, that is fight and flight, and fear brings that on. If we let go of that fear, if we choose to embrace the obstacle, I'm learning about Marcus Aurelius and Stoicism, and this is so cool. But if we really choose to embrace the obstacle and even love the obstacle, and then we move to that prefrontal cortex, and we move to that place of planning and creativity and collaboration and community, and that's our power. That's where we own this. And coming together with other women, like through 1 Million Women, is a wonderful way to do that. I have this chart here. Another thing, philanthropy. For those women who have the opportunity to gift money right now, this is the time to do that. Because if we wait till 2030, when we may or may not have gotten emissions down, that will be such a worse scenario than we gift money now. And women in the world, retired women, have more money than men. Another thing is opportunity. I'm just checking my thing. Oh, we also get to preach to the choir. Now, we learn about how change happens. Change just happens with a small group of people. It's not like we have to go out there and educate the other people. We don't need to do that. We have to preach to the choir and get ourselves to just do a little bit more, to structure it a little bit better and tell their friends what they're doing. It can be gentle, it can be social media, it can be anything like that. But that is what sparks the entire transition of change. So that gives us a huge element of optimism. And I know those of you who've been on the program today and last night, you can see what so many people are doing around the world. It's just heartfelt heart-opening experience to understand all of these things. I mean, it was amazing to hear about Australia, for example. 20% of their farmers are farming regeneratively. Isn't that amazing? Learning how to be a climatarian and pay attention in that way. We can all do that. So I am optimistic, and I am understanding that we women are powerful beyond anything that we can imagine. One of the ways to activate that is to also join a carbon crew, because we come together and we actually make plans in about a month's time to reduce our carbon footprint by 50%. It is so powerful. It's the most fun thing I've ever done. At the same time, join 1 million women and take that financial pledge. I'm so happy to have signed up for Climate First Bank very recently, and we have moved our finances into green investments. I also want you to know that I'm a white, older woman who's part of the 1%, and please don't diss me for that, because I am the biggest part of the problem. And if I can change my name, then flip it around. I am the biggest solution in the world. And maybe some of you are in that same boat too. So thank you very, very much for being with us here today.